This is the brand new 2024 Hyundai Kona, and it's a little compact crossover that's been totally redesigned this year. The Kona has been popular because it's affordable and practical, and now there's an all-new model. Today, I'm going to review it to show you what they've changed, and I'll show you all of its quirks and features. Today's video is brought to you by Cars and Bids, my online enthusiast car auction site that recently sold this, and this, and this, and this, and this. All right, time for the quirks and features of the new Hyundai Kona, starting with a general overview. So, the Kona first came out back in 2018 as Hyundai's kind of entry-level crossover. I thought the original model was tremendously weird-looking, but it was a hit. It was shockingly popular because there's a good combination of affordable and practical. Now, as I mentioned, the Kona has been redesigned for 24, so this is an all-new model, and the Kona's closest rivals are other little crossovers like the Subaru Crosstrek, the Volkswagen Taos, and the Mazda CX-30. The new Kona starts right around $25,000 with shipping for the base model, but this is the sporty Kona N line, which has a sticker price of around $32,000. As for powertrains, the new Kona is offered with front-wheel drive, two-wheel drive, or all-wheel drive if you choose it, and there are three different available engines. One is pure electric. You can get the new Kona as a full EV with up to 200 horsepower, which is pretty potent, but this is a gas-powered Kona, and when you choose a gas engine, you have two different options. The base level gasoline engine is a 2-liter 4-cylinder that makes 147 horsepower, or you can upgrade to this, a turbo 4-cylinder that makes 190 horsepower. This engine is standard in the N line, that's this one, or the Limited, the two top-end versions of the new Kona. Now, it's worth pointing out that the Kona N line is sort of a sportier version, but it's not the full high-performance Hyundai Kona N, which was offered on the old model. That had 276 horsepower in this little crossover. Hyundai hasn't yet said if they're going to be bringing back the full Kona N on the new version, but for now we have the N line. But while the new Kona N line may not be a full N model, it sure tries hard to make you think it's sporty. For example, you have this double spoiler on the top of the tailgate, like an old school rally car trying to maximize downforce to go through the turns, all for 190 horsepower. You also have this sporty rear diffuser you can see back here, improves the aerodynamics just like a race car, all for 190 horsepower. And you have two exhaust exits here. You can see this screaming dual exhaust to let out the power, all 190 horses of it. And then there's the badging, which is also pretty significant considering this isn't even the N model. You can see the wheel center caps have the N logo in them. You have N line badges on the front fenders on both sides, driver and passenger. You have an N line badge in the front grille, as you can see here. Open up the door, and the door sill is a checkered flag to really emphasize the performance potential. You have N line on the floor mats, you have N on the steering wheel, you have N on the seat backs, as you can see, and then there's a whole lot of red trim, all to commemorate that you have bought not the N, but the N line, and it's 190 horsepower. But okay, so that's the N-line stuff. I joke about it, but I actually like the N-line trim level a lot. It's kind of a nice middle ground in the Kona's lineup, but it is a little try-hard. Anyway, on to the other quirks and features, starting with the lighting, which is very interesting. The taillights are mounted, well, unusually low back here. You can see kind of a weird spot almost on the rear fenders or wheel arch. Pretty low, kind of strange placement, and separated from the rear light bar that goes across the back of the car. So you have two two kind of distinctive rear lighting elements, which is odd. Same deal up front. The headlights are mounted low in kind of a weird space, and it's just a little bit of a strange location to see headlights. They wanted to make it stand out, and it does. Now, up front, the headlights are also separated from the front light bar, but the weird thing about that light bar is it doesn't go all the way across. The bar itself does, but it doesn't light up the whole way across the car, which is, well, kind of a strange decision, but for some reason, that's what they decided to do. But anyway, next, getting inside the Kona N line. Couple of interesting things, starting with the key, which is this. It's so cool. It's the Hyundai logo, but then the negative space on the Hyundai H is all the buttons to unlock the doors. I absolutely love this. I think it's a brilliant idea, and I wish more automakers had this level of like cool thoughts with their keys. But anyway, climb inside, and the first thing you notice in here, the interior is legitimately impressive, particularly for this price point. The low $30,000 range, this is a nice place to spend time. Start with the seats. They look good. The red N-line accents might be a bit much, but you do have Alcantara here, which is a nice luxury surface. And just in case you're wondering if it is Alcantara, well, they tell you with this little tag just to make sure that you know. But it goes beyond that. The materials inside here, the dashboard, the steering wheel, everything is nicer than, in my opinion, you would expect at this price point. You look at the Subaru Crosstrek, the Chevy Trax, they're not as nice inside as the Kona. This car really near the top of the segment, up there with the Mazda CX-30. And there are some really nice features in the Kona N line. For instance, you have adaptive cruise control with driver assist steering, so it'll automatically steer for you in a lot of situations, which is really nice to see at this price point. You also have a fantastic infotainment system in this car, really one of my very favorites. It's very responsive, very intuitive, easy to use, easy to figure out, and it has a great home screen with several panels that show you basically everything you might want to see. Of course, also standard is Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, which makes the user experience even better. And another benefit of this infotainment system, you can make voice memos to yourself, so you can listen to them later. Here's an example.
Hello, everyone. Let me tell you about my quirks and features. Hello, everyone. Let me tell you about my quirks and features.
Other nice benefits of this interior, I really like the fact that the climate control is separate from the center screen, which means you can make all of your climate adjustments without having to go through any on-screen menus. And you have hard buttons for some screen functions like home, maps, search, media, all that stuff directs the screen where you want to go. So instead of trying to find those items on the screen, just tap these hard buttons below the screen to go to those spots. It makes this infotainment system even easier to use, and frankly, it's already pretty easy. One other cool thing about this infotainment situation, the parking camera is very easy to access. In most cars, the camera doesn't come on until you go into reverse, and if you want to find the camera otherwise, you got to go through a few menus and it's annoying. Well, here, if you push this button, the camera instantly comes on, which is nice to see. You can pull up the camera for any reason you might want. You don't have to be in reverse. Now, the only drawback here is there's only one camera, just a backup camera in this car, no side cameras or front camera, no 360 camera, which would be nice to have, but it's still good to be able to just pull it up with the push of a button. Now, speaking of that camera button, which is located here in the center console, some other important stuff here. For one, you have the drive mode dial. You can twist and go between the various different drive modes, normal, sport, eco. That's pretty standard. Interestingly, in the center of the drive mode dial, if you push that, you can lock the car into all-wheel drive. Of course, in typical driving, the Kona operates with its front wheels only until things start to slip, and then the back wheels can take over, but all-wheel drive can be manually locked in place, which you don't often see, but here it is in the Kona. It's kind of strange, but it could also be potentially kind of useful. You make the system work how you want it instead of waiting for it to detect that the wheels are slipping. But anyway, moving further down into the center console, you have this large open storage area here, and you can see cutouts for what looks like cup holders, but well, how could you store a cup in here? The answer is you push this little button and then whoosh, a cup holder appears and you can stick a cup in if you want to use it. If you don't, you can push the cup holder back out and then you have, well, a large storage panel again. Now, also worth pointing out, here in the center console, you have a wireless cell phone charger. That's what this pad is here in the middle. And above that, you have a lot of wired options for your device as well. You can see a cigarette lighter style charger, a couple of USB-C ports, and one of the USB-C ports can be toggled between charge only and charge and play on the infotainment system, which is kind of a cool idea. Instead of one port for each function, you can choose exactly how you want to use it. And there are some interesting and weird quirks in this interior as well. For instance, on the steering wheel in the center, you have these 4 dots, not the Hyundai logo, but 4 dots, which is kind of strange. Hyundai's also doing this on some of its Ioniq electric vehicles, the dots on the steering wheel, but those cars are all about squares and pixels. It's part of the theme. Here they just did it. It seems a little strange, but that's where they've gone. Also unusual is the gear selector in this car, which is a stalk coming off the steering column, and a rather large one. To go into gear, you twist the end of the stalk. You twist it up for drive, up to go forward. You twist it down for reverse, down to go backwards. Neutral is in the middle, and park can be accessed by pushing a button at the end of the stalk, a little bit unorthodox. Also odd and a little quirky in here, to the left of the steering wheel, you have this like pad, which doesn't seem to make sense. Is that a stereo speaker? No, it is a magnetized panel. So if you want to put like a fridge magnet there, you can, and then it's staring at you when you drive along in your N line. And next up, we move on to the back seat in the Kona N line. And I gotta say, the back seat of the new Kona is shockingly roomy considering where this car fits in Hyundai's lineup, how small and compact it is. This isn't the smallest Hyundai crossover anymore. That would be the Venue, but it's still a subcompact crossover, smaller than the Tucson, and there's decent space back here for knees, for legs, for hips, for heads, even on taller people. I'm surprised how much space you have in back. Now, unfortunately, other than the space, the back seat is a bit of a disappointment because it's been totally stripped of all the N-ness from the front. You don't have any red stitching back here like you had in the front, or red trim like you had in the front. You also lose the N embossed into the backrest like the front seat people had, and you don't get the cool checkered flag on the door sill. All of that is gone. The back seat is a lot more normal place to be, although you do still get Alcantara, which is probably the most important part since it's a nice material you're going to feel all the time. You probably won't miss the red trim pieces as much. With that said, there is still one piece of N-ness back here. The little climate control vents have tiny little strips of red on them to make sure you know it is a little on the sporty side. Strangely enough, one big N-line distinguishing feature is the red trim on the front climate vents. You can see it here. It goes across all the dashboard, but it's mainly used on the climate vents and the climate vent switches, which is an odd place to put sporty trim, but that's what they've done, and they've tied it into the back as well. And by the way, speaking of the climate vents back here, it's nice to see it. Most subcompact crossovers in this price point don't have rear climate vents, but this car does. It adds to the comfort, and that's nice to see. Below that, you also have charge ports for rear passenger devices, which is always nice, and you got cup holders in the doors if you want to use them, and more cup holders if you fold down the center armrest for your drink possibilities. And finally, we move on to the cargo area of the Kona, which, as you can see, is actually pretty large. Again, for a vehicle this size, it's a decent amount of space, just like in the back seat. Although worth pointing out, it's not really all that tall because the Kona isn't really all that tall, and you don't have extra space onto the floor. You lift this up, you can see there's a spare tire here. You could throw some stuff down here, but it's not really designed for it. Although you do have a little bit of space off to the left of the cargo area, which is kind of a neat little cubby where you can stick stuff if you want. And one other thing to keep in mind about the cargo area, the tailgate is not power operated. It's manual. You got to pull it down to close it. And every time you do, you'll see this blank area where the power tailgate switch would be, reminding you each time that you didn't spend the money to get the nice one with the power tailgate. All right, driving the Kona N line. Which is kind of a silly thing, as I showed you. a lot of go fast parts, but not entirely a lot of go fast. However, I have to say, I do like a lot of what the Kona has to offer, specifically this level of power and this level of technology for this price point. It's pretty impressive to me that you can get all this stuff. I mean, I get in this car and the only thing I'm looking around for is like a heated steering wheel, which would be cool. But otherwise, this car offers a lot for what it costs and what it is. A lot of people want more space, which is why they end up with vehicles like the Hyundai Tucson, the Santa Fe, etc., the Palisade. But if you need something kind of little and you want a little more ground clearance and all-wheel drive compared to a traditional compact car, I mean, this really delivers a lot of that stuff. I don't think it's the best looking vehicle. I think the inline stuff is kind of stupid, but it doesn't really matter when you're paying this price, like low $30,000-ish, and you're getting a really good smattering of technology as you are in this car. It's all pretty impressive. This car also has, driver assist tech, like I mentioned, with self-steering, which is just so impressive at this price point, at this number. Hyundai has always been kind of a value brand, packing their cars full of a lot of stuff for the money. And even though their reputation has increased to the point where they probably don't really have to do that in order to sell cars anymore like they used to, they still do. And so you still get an excellent value out of this car. And that's exactly, what it's here for and what it delivers. Now, from a driving perspective, this 1.6 liter turbo engine, I'm not a fan of the ultra small displacement turbos. They tend to feel pretty stressed, and this engine is a good example of that. When you step on the accelerator, it really takes a little bit of effort to get it going, not from a transmission perspective, but you just hear the engine working a lot harder than you would expect, an engine to be working at this power level. Like I'm going here, not all that crazy, and the engine just shoots up in revs. And I wonder if the fuel economy as a result kind of suffers, despite the fact that this car has an objectively very small powertrain. If you're trying to go anywhere, you basically have to dig deep into the powertrain, which really isn't ideal for preserving fuel economy. Now, with that said, I prefer this engine to the base model engine, which is probably just going to feel completely underpowered. Now, interestingly, the ride is surprisingly smooth. It feels like nicer in here than the Subaru Crosstrek. I just had a Crosstrek press car, and it felt good. It was a nice car, but this just has a nicer interior. It has a nicer feeling ride quality to it, nicer seats. It's just it feels a little bit more upscale, even though from a price point perspective, it actually isn't. Now, in terms of steering and handling, I gotta say the N-line stuff really is just cosmetic. There may be some sort of suspension improvement or upgrade or steering improvement or upgrade, but I don't really notice it, and that includes when I go over into sport mode. When you go into sport mode, the steering response is tightened up a little bit. The throttle response is definitely sharper, which is nice because maybe you don't have to floor it and dig quite down so far for the power. But in terms of steering and handling, I mean, truthfully, it steers like a compact crossover. It steers like the small crossover that it is. I wouldn't consider it to be like especially sporty or exciting. The powertrain does feel reasonably strong for one of these, particularly when you're comparing it to the Crosstrek, which despite updates and upgrades they've made, still feels pretty slow. But this is fine. I wouldn't say it's like tremendously sporty, and I don't think, even with the N-line stuff, I don't think that's why most people are going to be buying this. I think they'll buy it because it's competent, it's good, it's got a lot of nice benefits, especially for the price point, and I think that's where this shines. By the way, one other thing to mention from a seating position perspective, it feels taller than I expected, which is a good thing. A lot of people like, crossovers because they have a higher seating position, but the littler ones tend to feel more like cars. This has a little bit of a higher seating position than I thought it would have. Not like a true SUV like a Chevy Tahoe or even a Honda Pilot, but it does sit pretty high up, and so you do get a little bit more of that crossover feel, which I think is a nice thing that most people are looking for in these crossover. And so that's the new 2024 Hyundai Kona. There's a lot to like here, and the new Kona delivers a lot, particularly in terms of affordability and practicality for the price. And if you're looking for a tiny crossover that does it all, this is a good bet. And now it's time to give the new Kona a DougScore. And the DougScore is here, 43 out of 100, which puts the Kona N-line here against some similar cars. It's near the back, but worth pointing out that most of these are larger and more powerful than the Kona, and thus more expensive too. If you're looking for a real compact crossover with a little flair, the Kona N-line is that, though the N-line doesn't add much excitement beyond some cosmetic upgrades.